Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Admissions Live. We're broadcasting from Saratoga Springs. I think I got an echo. Hold on one second. There we go. We're tuning in from Saratoga Springs this week. I hope the connection is okay for you. We're on a different internet speed, but I want to welcome you to the show. We come to you every week live. This is a weekly web show for admissions professionals and high school counselors alike. We're part of the Higher Ed Live network, which is all about digital development and professional empowerment. We've got Andy Akins on the show tonight, and we're talking about college-bound high school students from rural America. As always, we have lots to talk about, and I'm excited to get to the show. But before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors that make Admissions Live possible. Admissions Live is sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. Learn how LaRoche College has incorporated Scavenger into its visit program to demonstrate, or actually to differentiate itself from other colleges. We've sent out a tweet so you can check out what LaRoche College has been doing with that Scavenger app. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Zinch.com, the leader in social admissions. Is your program being bombarded with applicants from China? Zinch is offering a free webinar on Wednesday. The Zinch China team will review best practices in two critical areas. First, the applications themselves, evaluating credentials, assessing extracurricular activities and awards, and conducting interviews. Second, they'll cover managing Chinese social media while ensuring that your brand name is being protected against misuse by agents and others. We've sent out a link to that webinar, so be sure to check it out and register now. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Welcome to College, who believe it's all in the college visit. They've created web and mobile applications to help institutions measure and manage their most critical recruitment tool, the college visit. Find Welcome to College on Facebook or Twitter for live updates from their journey with Marv to South by Southwest. And if you don't know who Marv is, you got to be sure to check him out. Last but certainly not least this week, Admissions Live is sponsored by Integral. Integral is the creator of the Schools app on Facebook. Check out their webinar series about how they connect private social networks to increase your yield and retention. That happens tomorrow and nearly every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We've sent out a tweet with that link, so be sure to sign up if you haven't done so already. All right, folks, I'm ready to introduce my guest for tonight's show, Andy Akins. Andy is a school counselor from Cambridge Central School in Cambridge, New York. If you're not sure where that is, I'm not surprised. We're going to kind of break that down for you. Andy has worked at Cambridge since November 2010, and he's responsible for grades 10 through 12. He's got a caseload of about 194 students. He's graduated with his Master's of Science in Professional School Counseling from Sage Graduate School, and he's also a graduate of St. Michael's College up in Vermont. So without further ado, I want to bring Andy onto the show. Andy, how we doing?
I'm doing well. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. You're doing good. Cool. All right, awesome. So, welcome. I'm really happy to be working with you tonight. Andy and I are good friends. And why are we talking about rural students today? I guess I didn't give that big of an intro to our topic, so do you want to do that for us?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to the rural perspective. First, thanks for having me on. This is a cool opportunity to get to talk about the demographic that I feel strongly about. I came from a small school. I graduated with about 40 kids, and then now being in a small school again, I feel like I can really wrap my head around that demographic. And there's a lot of things that make it unique coming from a small school. And I've had the opportunity to work in a kind of a large suburban school. We had 10,000 kids in the district, and I was one of 9 counselors, and I really enjoyed that time there. But what that did is it kind of solidified for me how important those connections are. And sometimes in a bigger school, you might not have the access to the resources that you may have in a big school, such as college classes, AP classes. But what I found in a small school is those connections are really strong. Sometimes it can be detrimental to the student because it's almost like you know them too well. if that could ever be true. But with a small school, I've found that my skill set really matches well with that. I don't know whether it's my background or not. But anyways, back to your question. Cambridge is it's on the eastern part of New York State. We're about a half hour from Bennington, Vermont, and about an hour from Albany. And the biggest I would say urban area is probably Bennington in terms of closeness. Albany, like I said, is an hour away, and there is some opportunities for students there. But we're definitely out there. We're really rural, so.
Awesome. Just want to bring myself back on real quick. And if anyone's having any technical issues, I know a couple of people had us drop when we were both on, but it seems to be smooth sailing now. So we have had a really smooth connection on our side of the show, so we'll be sure to catch any blips up in the archive. But Andy, thank you for that intro. I know you've got a lot of experience being from a rural area yourself and are ready to kind of give us all sorts of really good information about what these students' perspectives are like and what they're looking for, how their college search goes, what kind of a fit they might be looking at. So I want to start to just kind of dive into some of those topics that you gave us a really good intro about. But if you could, for us, kind of describe the characteristics of a student coming from a rural school, and if you can, kind of compare that to your other experiences working at larger suburban schools.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? It's funny. Coming from a small school, I think it's unique in that there are certain things that stand out. One for me is the lack of diversity. It's hard unless you're really pushing and you're able to get to different areas, or you have other resources. Sometimes it could be a challenge. In our district, and then also the district that I grew up in, which is different, there wasn't, and even where I'm at now, there's not a huge percentage of people that have high-speed internet access. So that can really be a challenge. As you know, nowadays, so many things are, social media related, and there's so much video out there for these schools where kids can really reach out and use that. So we're 98%, white demographic. We do have transportation challenges in that we don't have public transportation in a lot of ways that some of these, more urban areas would have. So that can be a challenge.
Yep.
Another challenge is, with this economic downturn, we do have quite a large percentage. We have 37% of our kids are on free or reduced lunch. So those are some of the challenges. But I would definitely argue, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I am where I am, is that the strengths definitely outweigh those negatives. In that the people that come from this this area and the area that I grew up in are fiercely independent. They form really strong relationships. They're loyal, and for the most part, very hardworking and honest. And it's that character piece that I think is so marketable when we're talking about that next step. When I see 10th graders come in, and right now we're meeting with 10th graders and with juniors. By we, I mean me. I'm the 10th or 12th counselor. So with that said, we're meeting with these guys, and I tell them, believe it or not, you're going to be, 3 more years and you're going to be on your way. You could stay here, okay, but there's going to be other opportunities for you too. And I think that when we talk about fit down the road, it's going to be important for, and I'll bring it up too for my experiences, but there's a different route for each person. And the cool thing about a small school is that you can actually get into figuring out, what that fit is for each person. Sometimes in a big school, that can be a challenge for sure.
Cool. Yeah, so I kind of want to back up and go into a little bit more detail on some of those points.
Sure.
The internet point is a great point to make, because so many colleges, not only are they offering a lot online, but they're actually taking away some of those other resources in print and moving them completely web-based.
Right.
And if you're a school that is a really good fit for this type of student, and who doesn't want that honest moral character,
Yeah, right.
really strong academic student. If you're looking for a student that comes from a small community that's going to fit well, maybe at your smaller community-based college, you need to be sensitive to what kind of resources they have. And in talking about resources, I'm sure on the curriculum side of things and the college prep side of things that there are differences too. So have you seen, in comparing to the bigger suburban schools, in college preparation, what students have available to them versus what they might have had available if they were in a bigger suburban school, and kind of give us an idea of the college readiness of students in that same respect?
Yeah, right. That's a great question. In that, you know, I would really argue that although we have limited resources in terms of the AP classes that we can offer our kids, if you were to look at our, program of studies in terms of the classes that you can offer a kid, all the way through, we're going to have less AP classes on every level. And when you're comparing apples to apples with, a large suburban school or a different school of a bigger nature. With that, we have proven to be college ready. I was just going kind of crunching the numbers this week too, and I did compare it with large suburban schools. On average, for large suburban schools, in my experience, they've had about 33% of their students graduate with advanced Regents diplomas. Where in looking at the students from our demographic, a smaller demographic, we have about 35%. Graduate with advanced Regents diplomas. And what does that mean? Does that mean that they're all college ready? No, probably not. What it means is that they've shown at least a higher degree of seriousness toward their studies, and that they're generally taking 4 years of English, 4 years of social studies, and then 4 of science and math, and moving forward with that. Oftentimes taking a language, but not necessarily. So with that said, we've had students that have done really well, but it generally they have to be a little bit more creative with their programming. We do have a couple different options for them through some specific programs for engineering students, for medical geared students that they can do really well through that. But it's not a slam dunk. You have to, if you're a really driven student, you've got to kind of live it right from the beginning and say, hey, I know there's going to be some challenges here, but if I want to make this, I can do it, but I'm going to have to think outside the box. And I think that's that challenge that has set our students apart. Last year we had a student go to Yale, and she was huge in terms of being really motivated and saying, hey, this is my goal. I'm going to make it happen, and I know I can do it from here. And I think any student, it doesn't matter where they are, if they have that attitude, they can certainly go, wherever they want, and if they're academically motivated. So
yeah, that's great. And I think we've seen a lot of great comments coming in the back channel from your comments that you just made there. And I think admissions counselors do give kids a break depending on what their academic disadvantages have been.
Right.
So if you're a student who if your first language is not English, I expect that student to have a lower critical reading and writing score. This is not their native language, and we understand that when we're starting to look at test scores. And there's a number of scenarios like that, but I'm curious to know if there is that kind of a standard for students at smaller rural schools, and do we really pay attention to the academic disadvantage that they might have and overlook a qualified student who might just not have had that extra SAT prep class or whatever it was that got the suburban or urban student through the door. So I think you make great points that it's important to look at more of that overall character of the person, and if it is going to be a really good academic fit for the student based on other parts of their application too, and not just those tests. Yeah,
and when push comes to shove too, I think that's a great point, in that when push comes to shove, our numbers still need to match up, and I tell students, there can't be any excuses here. you're going to be compared across the board with people that are coming from different areas and that have their own set of challenges too. And I think that they know that coming in. And the one thing that I tell students is oftentimes people are coming from different backgrounds, different demographics, different challenges. And we may have our own set of challenges, but we've got to embrace that because that's all we have. And that if you're writing a college essay and you want to totally discredit, your upbringing and where you came from, and kind of not pretend to be someone different, but maybe focus on something that's not entirely you, that to me isn't probably the best idea. If you come from a rural background and you grew up on a farm and you're working every morning at 5 a.m., you don't have to focus your whole essay on that. But you might want to give that admissions person some insight into the type of person you are.
Yep.
My critical reading might be a 550, might not be a 600, but hey, when it comes to being reliable and honest and being a hard worker, I can make it happen. Because with the whole college admissions process, and this might be kind of on a tangent, but I don't necessarily know if it's a great indicator or, I don't know if it correlates to success down the road. It can be a great indicator, of success. But oftentimes, I know you've seen it at the admissions level. You've had a student that might not have looked great on paper, but got there their freshman year and really took that opportunity to heart. And I think that that's what we're looking for, trying to teach those kids that they can make the most out of the opportunity. But it's important to have those numbers too, the AP scores and the SAT scores too.
Sure. And yeah, that essay point is, fantastic. How many kids have that kind of an experience, like getting up in the morning and working and instilling that work ethic from, such a young age in a student is not an experience that most students have. And, for someone that comes from a rural area and maybe a lot of their peers have similar experiences, it's not what I see written about in many college essays. And maybe that's just because my university isn't a good fit for them, but that might not be true either. I think, in giving students that encouragement to write about some of those, key characteristics about themselves, so that the admissions counselor really does understand what their background is and where they're coming from and what other kind of skills they have, that shines. I mean, that shines so much more than what you learned that one football game that you scored the winning touchdown. How many kids have that experience versus how many kids wake up in the morning and work on the farm? Yeah,
right. It's a good point.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about their application process. You mentioned, you kind of alluded earlier that you're working with sophomores already, and I'm sure you've got all sorts of stuff going on with juniors and seniors too, but can you walk us through a little bit of what that, college readiness process is for your students, and any kind of things that jump out to you that seem like challenges or seem like questions that you get a lot, so that we have a good idea about what their perspective is?
Sure. Just to hit on that, I really feel lucky in that I have 66 seniors, I have 55 juniors, and then roughly in the 60s, low 70s for the sophomores too. So I'm lucky. My office is right on the main hallway there. I'm not in a suite. I'm not back away from the students. Every period, unless I'm stuck in a meeting, which with a parent or something like that, I'm out in the hallway. We're lucky enough, me and the other counselor I work with from 7 through 9, and our administrative assistant, and everyone else in the school for the most part, knows every student by name. So we start with the 10th graders. We call it March Madness in that we just had our parent financial aid night, which really got the ball rolling. I talked to sophomores next week. I just got out of the classrooms with the juniors. And right now, this was the first week. We had a couple of junior meetings yesterday and today. But this starts a process for juniors, and their parents have come in. So just to kind of back up, we start with the sophomores, just starting that ball rolling and saying, hey, this is real. You got to start living it if this is what you want to do. We're not telling you that this is what you have to do, But if you really want to, you're going to have to start thinking about who's going to write your letter of recommendation. What are some extracurricular activities that would be good to start to think about right now? What would be a good idea for, an essay? Have you thought about moving away from home? Just planting those seeds and making it more of a reality. Starting to talk to them, having some seniors come in and talk with them. One of the big things with my junior meetings, I had some seniors kind of stick back and talk to them and say, hey, guys, what are some things that stood out to you now that you're a senior that you wish you would have known as a junior? Some things that really came up to them is start early. There's no reason to really put this stuff off, and so that's big. So I haven't even talked about the seniors yet, but I start meeting with the seniors the first week of school, and I find that the students that are really motivated, the ones that are doing early action, early application, are right there at my door, ready to go, emailing me over the summer, wanting to get the ball rolling, have their letters of recommendation going. And then I actually had my final senior meeting in January. So that first block of school, the whole first half of school is really dedicated to the seniors and getting that going. We had 144 applications come through, a ton of on the Common App, I'm sure you see too. And so a lot of it is just making sure that those students have every detail covered so that they're not limited from that angle. One challenge that we did have, which we've kind of remedied through with the help of the administration at our school, is we now have a computer with high-speed internet access just for the students, kind of like a desk that they can go to at any time during a study hall. They can work on SAT prep, they can sign up for SATs, they can look at college applications, they can get on College Navigator or College Confidential. And they found that that's really helpful for them. And so for the seniors right now, I'd like to think things are really kind of getting kind of solid for them. Mid-year reports are out and they're starting to hear. We're doing the financial aid piece, but for me, that's really kind of cut and dry. It's more of kind of work with the parents. Like I said, last month we had the parents come in. They sit at the computer and start to plug in their FAFSA information. For a lot of these students, and we can talk about this later on too, but a high percentage of them are first-generation college students. So, and they might be the first person, if they're not a first-generation college student, they're the first person in their family to have gone to college. And I think that's important to note too, because even though their mom or dad may have gone to school, and you know this as well as I do, them going to school now is a totally different landscape than what their mom went to. It's totally different.
Yeah.
It's a crazy process, and you know that. But sometimes mom and dad said, well, when I went to school, I put together, an essay and I put a stamp on it and, and filled out my name and address and I sent it in and then I showed up in the fall. And it's not like that anymore,
Right. So here's a question.
Sure.
What do you see the parent involvement like? And is there any difference between the students that you're working with now versus some of the students that you were working with and their parents at some of the bigger suburban schools?
That's a great question. I'll start with the suburban school. I had an opportunity to work there for a year, and I really liked that experience. And one thing with the suburban schools is that it's a really high-achieving culture. Mm-hmm. It's a culture of success, and I think they have a better grasp sometimes of how things are perceived, how important things like resumes are, how important extracurriculars are, community service. Those things are really important. And not that they're not important in a rural area, but in a suburban area, there's a better focus on the whole economic job environment. So they're used to interviews and more used to interviews and things like that. So I wouldn't call it a helicopter culture, but I would call it a lot more checks and balances in terms of these are the schools that student A needs to get into, their child. How are we going to make it happen? These are the colleges that maybe his brother went to, his dad went to, and we've been thinking about this since preschool. That type of attitude where, and I don't like to generalize, but on the rural side, it can be good in a lot of ways because it's more, where do you think you fit? What school fits you as a junior? As opposed to, you're going to go to Princeton, and I don't care if you're in first grade, we got to make that happen. Start working on your college app. And that's obviously a generalization, but sometimes it can feel like that. Where on the rural side, we're really trying to pull the parents in with those meetings that are really important to get them on the same page. But oftentimes there's not the wealth of resources from a college perspective on the rural side. And that's
Yeah.
not necessarily bad. It's just kind of the way that the system's set up.
Yeah, so
And
you see students more in the driver's seat
yeah,
in
definitely.
your school now. Okay.
Right, and I think that's a really, really big advantage. You know, when you talk about the student being in the driver's seat, when I have a student come to me like this year, we have a great student that's going to go to NYU, and last year we have a student that went to Yale, and I knew when they came to me and said, "Hey, this is my dream. This is what I want to do,"
Yeah.
and I could look in their eyes, and I really knew it was coming from them, and that's when I know a student's going to be successful. When they can tell me without me telling them where they should go, they can tell me what they want, and then they can ask me, well, let's get there. You know, how can we get there? And that's where I'm most successful. I'm not successful when I have to tell a kid, well, this might be a good area to look in. I can do that, but I'm more successful when I can look at a kid and say, all right, let's get there. Let's figure out how we need to get there, because you already have that goal picked out. And so with that said, when a kid without being pushed comes to me and says, this is my goal, I feel really comfortable about that. And sometimes you don't see that as much in the suburban end.
Very cool. Yeah. We've got some great chatter from folks in the back channel, and I'm sure they're going to have questions for you. So if you do, get your questions ready. But I know Andy's got a few other really cool things to talk about. You try to tap the students for info, and I think you're doing some pretty innovative things at Cambridge. So, you know, what kind of things are you kind of strategizing for your students? And what do you think has been working best recently?
Well, you know, my big thing is really kind of making that connection to the students, and my main kind of platform, if you want to call it, as a school counselor from day one has been, I don't have all the answers. This is an ever-changing, evolving kind of process, and it's crazy. But I have told the students from day one that you can always come in, you can always set up an appointment, and we can always look into things. And I think it's that transparency, it's that openness. Like when students come in, they can look at my calendar. You know, they can say, hey, I know you're not free first, second, or third, but can I come in fourth period and let's look at some stuff? And I've really looked at, and I think that this is an important thing for admissions people and for high school people, is that we're not there unless the kids are there. So that space is really their space, you know, and I look at it as being a resource for them. I think so often we want to kind of take over spaces, and this is my office, and you come in, set up your appointment, make it happen, as opposed to, all right, I'm here and you're here, let's make it happen. Because like I said before, like it or not, you don't get to stay here after your senior year. And you got a couple options, but you might want to start looking into it now. And I think it's that attitude, it's that transparency that's going to, you know, help these kids move forward. Because anytime you try to force something down these students' throat, it can be hard, and they might be successful at first, but I don't think that long-term success is going to be there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So some of the things that you've seen work well for students or for admissions folks who might visit your school, what kind of recommendations would you give maybe to other school counselors who are working with a similar population of students, or even if you have some genius ideas to share with all school counselors, go for that too. Or for those admissions folks like me who are traveling around to different schools, is there anything that we can provide that would be helpful that you don't see coming in, or any kind of ideas on that side of the communication for, you know, probably those maybe juniors this spring, or when they turn into seniors in the fall, when you see more, when they're, I guess, in that part of the process?
Yeah, right. You know, for me, like I don't have any I wouldn't say, you know, like, you know, crazy ideas or anything like that. The hard thing for me is reaching the students, and I've been lucky. I wouldn't say it's the hard thing. It's a challenge because so often now, it's a YouTube generation, it's Facebook, Twitter is so powerful. Uh, and I want to continue to expose these students to that, but in reality, they're students that some of them don't have an email account. If they do have an email account, and I've talked to them about this, let's make it appropriate. You know what I mean? Let's make it professional. Let's start thinking about those things, and let's think about the marketplace that we're in, and try to really sell that package and that skill set. But one thing, I'm lucky enough, I work with the newspaper group, a school newspaper group every day during lunch, and these students are motivated. They come in, they're phenomenal. And the one thing that I want to do with that is continue to push and connect, every time we publish that, with having, whether it's a college corner or some admissions contact on there, and just to put a name with a face with these students, because sometimes when you're isolated, the geographic region kind of makes you feel like that's the only thing that's going on in the whole world out there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can feel like, the college might not even know you're there, but where in reality, if you're a strong kid, you're successful, you're academically motivated, that college, I believe, wants you there. So mm-hmm. I think it's really creating that connection on the level where our school newspaper is a way to connect with the kids. Mm-hmm. I want to use that as the way to connect outside the building too. Another thing that we have been successful with in the past is bringing the kids that are freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors in college, bring them back and have a discussion panel with our current students. Because so oftentimes I can give them some advice and tell them what might be best, but when they hear it from their peers, it's really powerful. So those are a couple of things that we really have in the works. Another thing that I found to be really successful is we have a folder system in our office where the students, it's free reign, it's their folder, and it's in my office, and it's a collection of college items for them. It's a collection of SAT sign-up dates. It could be their fee waiver. We have 37% of our kids are in free or reduced lunch. So a lot of our kids are fee waiver kids, and which is awesome. I push them. Take advantage of it. Take that test as many times as you can. Try to get your scores up to where they need to be. So anyways, with the folder system, if they get any piece of literature from a college, they're able to drop that thing right off at me. They might not even open it at the time. I've had students just drop it off. Hey, Mr. Akins, can you hold this for a couple days? Yep. I need some time before I can get in and we can take a look at it. Because oftentimes they'll take their stuff, spread it out on the table, and then go from there. So from a college standpoint, if you're able to make a connection, from a college admission standpoint, if you're able to make a personal connection with that student and let them know that they're there, I mean, obviously that's the biggest thing. When we talk about counseling here, and I'm kind of rambling on, but it's all about relationships too. If the students trust you, that you're not out there to trick them or fool them, mm-hmm. and I think we can all agree that college is not a trick. It's the number one way to kind of pull yourself up in my mind, and I'm confident of that. But you're there to help, then that's that trust. So I love having a spot where they say, hey, I'm not going to mess with it. You can drop it off here. I don't care what it is, and we'll take a peek at it. And we're lucky. We're small enough where we can do that. Yeah. On a bigger scale, I think it's hard. But it's just a couple things, and we're trying to, whether you're talking about a school program or even like a sports program, it's more of a culture, a culture of kind of moving toward the right thing. So I think we're working on that, and we're not there yet. But those are the little things I think can help. For sure.
Yeah, I love the idea of the school newspaper and involving a college corner and getting some of those college representatives in there giving tips or just showing the accessibility that they do have. It's almost a mirror of what a lot of colleges are doing with blogs on their website, but kind of, it's allowing that same blog article that you would write and put up on your college website and putting it right in the hands of their students in their own school newspaper. So kudos to you for, pushing that agenda and kind of bridging that technology barrier for those students and giving them the access to that information. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. So I want to make sure we are able to answer any questions. So folks, if you're tuning in and you have questions for Andy, fire them away right now. I have a couple more questions for Andy that I want to make sure I get in, but now is your time. So my last questions, and I think we've kind of talked about a lot of this stuff, but what is really working best? Getting that student through the process and, in a successful kind of way. I think you've mentioned that sometimes there's apprehension to get out to campus visits or apprehension to kind of take the plunge to understand that college isn't not only an option, but it's, you're able to go away to school, even if your parents didn't do that. So for that student that maybe isn't the one coming into your office saying, this is the school I want to go to, I know I want to do it, how do I get there?
Right.
That student that's, kind of teetering, what are those key success points for them? Not just what you're doing, but, what would also be helpful for colleges, I guess, to do to help that student kind of break down that barrier? Is it offering, visit programs, or is it, it might not be giving them a link to that virtual tour that's not going to run on a dial-up network.
Yeah, right.
So what are some other things that we can try to be innovative about if this is definite, if these are the students we want to recruit?
Sure. I think it's a great question. And as I'm thinking about it, with all this innovation and moving forward, I think that sometimes at first that stands out, the new, the complex. But I think with this environment, I think all demographics can glean something from being simple and straightforward. I think the process is inherently made for students that have more support. It's a process, and I did a postgraduate year at Worcester Academy, and the support there for me on a college standpoint was totally different than my high school support. And oftentimes I wondered, wow, I'm getting a lot of help here, and it's making this process more reasonable. But I often wondered about maybe people that came from different demographics, how are they doing this? How are they getting through this process? How are they securing these letters of recommendation? How are they building their resume? Do they have a template? Little things like that. So I would like to see more consistency across the college platform when we're talking about web pages and applications. And I know we've moved toward that a little bit with the Common App, but I think even from the web page, if just like we have the net price calculator for each school, and that's mandated, I think that we should have a mandated one-page resource free of any sort of advertisement. Whether it's right there on the homepage and it's accessible, and that if you click on it, it tells you the requirements, the straight requirements, and each web page has that. Or has those requirements somewhere, but oftentimes they're not as accessible, to these students that are really looking out. Sometimes, a student finds out later on that, hey, I needed my SAT 2s, or I needed a letter of recommendation from a math teacher, and I got it from my art teacher. Those are all things that I can certainly be a resource for these students for, but what it does is making it more complex like that. It hurts the students that don't have a ton of support at home, or they don't have a lot of support at school, and it actually limits students that can actually be really successful in school. Because I'm really convinced that the process is not a great indicator of who's going to be successful. And sometimes people have kind of argued or debated about, well, you shouldn't really have to help these students so much through the college process, because if they can't get through the college process, how can they manage a college course load? And I argue that every time, and that if you sit a motivated student that's intellectual down in a freshman seat with a professor that's dynamic and is able to grab their attention, they're going to do backflips for you. And in this process that's alien to them, that seems out there, isn't always a good indicator. So, and we're talking about students that might have to be dealing with the idea of moving away from home and dealing with that whole process too. And so, I mean, It's just I wish there was more consistency on that basis, but I think we're moving toward that. If you think about it from a media standpoint and an internet standpoint, this is relatively new in terms of all this information, and it expands every year too. So I think a movement back towards simplicity is probably going to be something we'll see in the next couple of years, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think we see it on both sides, and I absolutely love your response to that because this is an increasingly complicated process for the first generation students that we have coming in, and for, like you said earlier, not just first generation students, but first in your family this year.
Yeah, right.
And while we see some efforts to kind of streamline things, like going through the Common Application, I'm also seeing schools that are complicating things more by adding more things to their supplement, adding in video essays, adding in all
Right.
sorts of different requirements for each school,
Hmm.
rather than going the streamline route.
Yeah,
And
right.
I think it does do a disservice to the student. If you can make this process easier for them and show them up front, like you said on the website, give them that information up front so that they can start making an informed decision about whether this is going to be the right fit school for them.
That's a
And
great point.
if they can make that decision earlier, it's going to be helpful for the student. It's going to be helpful for the college because you're going to hopefully be receiving applications from students that are a better fit to your institution, and make this process start moving a little bit smoother. But I don't think that's the direction that everyone's going.
Yeah.
When colleges are interested in more applications, to, kind of change their selectivity rates and, have other kinds of goals in mind. I don't think that's always, or, they want to do something like a video essay, which could be really cool.
Right.
It's kind of, it sounds like a fun thing to do, but, is that really complicating the process so much more? And what students are you alienating by adding that to your application? So that's a great point that you make. We do have a couple of questions that have come in.
Cool.
One question that came in from Gil Rogers: do you see students wanting to stay closer to home, or are they looking to go far away?
That's a great question. We don't have a large population of kids that really go. Like we don't have a ton of applications to UCLA or we're really out there. The kids that we have generally stay within our region. When I'm looking at the schools that our top 10 kids went to, we're talking Cornell, Siena, Yale, Union, Emerson, really strong Northeast schools that have done really well. So with that, there is that general tendency to kind of stay in the region, and I think that might be across the board too. But with that, it's funny too. Some students know right away, like they know, man, that I'm going to use this, the environment that I'm in to the best of my abilities and use it as a positive. And I love those kids that use that as a positive. But I also know that I'm going to, try to move on to and kind of go to, a bigger pool of people. But with that said, we really care a ton about the students that go to 2-year schools, Hudson Valley and Adirondack Community College and a couple other schools. And we care about those people because those are the ones that are really in our community, and those are the ones that we get to work with, and those are the people that really are going to be the culture that we live in too. And if they're successful, then we're successful. So there's really that 4-year population, and then there's that really strong 2-year population too. So I think they're both have their merits, but they're definitely different.
Awesome. One more question to fire at you. If a college does have either an online resource that they're trying to push out to students, or social networking capabilities to help connect your students with their students, what's the best way to get that information to them? Is there a way to get that information to them?
That's a great question. For us, our students have they call it ClassLink, so you can log on to that, and you have limited access. You won't have any access to any social media, anything like that. And, there's no email access. no Facebook, certainly no Twitter, anything like that. So really, that's kind of a straight no. You know, they could do it at home. Few will, and that's kind of the challenge that we're up against. And I know that from a local government standpoint, they've tried to change that a little bit in terms of to get more access there.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it's really kind of it's out there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Andy, thank you so much. This has been really one of my favorite shows.
Cool.
So thanks for coming on. And if you have more questions for us, or if we missed your questions, Andy and myself will try to follow up with you. Thank you, everyone who is tuning in. It's been a really fun show for me, and I hope you can join us next week. At the same time, Tuesday night, 7 p.m., we'll have Mallory Wood on the show, and we're going to be talking about video for your student recruitment process. So I hope you can tune in next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.